Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we look to bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector and their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry.
Today we are speaking with Leon Alkalai, the CEO of Mandala Space Ventures. After some incredible industry experience, which includes 32 years as a tech fellow at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, where he worked on some fascinating lunar robotic exploration projects, Leon has re-entered the world of space as an entrepreneur, an investor and a mentor. His latest endeavour, Mandala Space Ventures, is a venture studio dedicated to creating and investing in new space companies, enabling founders to launch new pathways to space for the benefit of humanity. With such extensive experience across the industry, Leon's got some really palpable advice for people from all backgrounds looking to enter into the space sector.
Hi, Leon. How are you?
Hello, good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. Very excited to have you with us here today. I think there's a lot we can talk about. You've got a really amazing history of experience in the space industry, which I think gives you a really unique insight into the sector, which I'm looking forward to delving into today.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, you've been involved in some really amazing projects. I was having a look over your early career at NASA and was so interested to learn about some of the lunar mission concepts that you were involved in. Particularly, I enjoyed your vision of a permanent lunar robotic village.
Oh, good. I'm glad you found that.
Yeah, I did. It was really amazing. So interesting. I think it was a workshop you were doing at Caltech.
Yes, that actually, some of that work goes back to 2010, so about a dozen years ago, where I presented a series of visionary lectures on the international colonization or settlement of the moon in a kind of a communal way, representing all of Earth rather than any one country. And so that was a vision that I shared with the lunar exploration advisory group called the League back in 2010.
No, I did see a bit of that in the presentation. It was such incredible work. It's so amazing to be involved in that field, especially I'm particularly interested in the moon. So that was great for me to listen to. And you've also, something I came across, you've done some amazing work with ventilators, which I'm sure we will touch on later. But I think a really great place, amazing, incredible. But I think a really great place to kind of begin the story is kind of the early days of Leon Alkalai. So yeah, let's start from the beginning. Talk us through where you started in life, kind of where you grew up, school, college, and how you eventually found your way into your early career at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab.
Very good. Well, I hope you have a few minutes because that's not a simple or straightforward answer.
Yeah, we do.
And if you're patient enough. So what I can say in summary, and then I can go into any details, is that I grew up in a very international way. My family, my parents were born in the former Yugoslavia, so in Southeast Europe. And I was born in Belgrade, today's Serbia. At the time, it was Yugoslavia. And my parents, they came out of the Second World War. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. My dad was in the partisans fighting the Germans and so on. They met after the war in '53 in Yugoslavia. I was born in '58. But the real beginning, I would say, is that my father quit the Yugoslav army just as I was born in Belgrade. And it just totally happened by fluke, by total random circumstances, that Yugoslavia at the time was opening up to the world. It was trying to open up to the world as a kind of its own model of socialism at the time. And my dad was part of what was called the Yugoslav National Tourism Bureau. And he was sent to New York City in 1960. So I was 1 year old when I came to New York. And so my first language was not the Queen's British, Queen's English language. It was New York. So that was my first language, really. That's what I first spoke. At home, we spoke Serbian at home, but my brother and I grew up in New York. So we lived in New York for 6 years. Then my father was brought back to Yugoslavia for 5 years, where I went to school. And then at the age of 12, we moved to London. So I grew up in London, my teenage years, early teenage years. I first lived in Acton in West London, and then we moved to Chiswick in also West London. And I very much enjoyed my time in London, as I was a good soccer player. That helped a lot. And also played excellent ping pong, table tennis, and tennis. So I was good at sports, and that helped me a lot with getting around kids and so on. And then later we moved back after 5 years back to Belgrade, where I finished high school and finished the engineering degree. And at the age of 23, I decided to go to the United States to get a graduate degree. And I knew very little about the process, so I only applied to one school, as opposed to today's generations applied to several dozen. So I only applied to UCLA, and just thought there was no other option but to have them accept me, and that was just how I assumed, and that worked out well. So I started UCLA computer science and computer science at UCLA in 1983. And I got my PhD in 1989, finished in computer architecture. And the very fortunate thing happened, again, a totally random thing. A fellow from JPL came recruiting at UCLA. And that was in the spring of 1989. His name is Kim Gostelow, and he came to interview people at UCLA. It was a number of us who went for an interview, and he really liked me. And it helped a lot that I somehow knew all of his previous publications, papers. I read them as part of my research. So when I interviewed, I did extremely well. He immediately wanted me to join JPL. I had at least half a dozen offers, top offers from Bell Labs, Bellcore, Hewlett Packard, Hughes Research Labs, and others. And to JPL's credit, they matched my highest offer. And I was offered to join JPL in the summer of 1989. And I stayed there for 32 years. And I'm very proud of my career at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California Institute of Technology, where I recently retired as a fellow of the laboratory and technical fellow, and now doing my new venture called Mandala Space Ventures.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be very proud of. And I think it's so incredible to hear about your journey, because that is so at the core of this podcast, is these diverse backgrounds. And moving around so much as a child, that must be difficult in so many ways. But it's so great to hear that you still managed to find kind of what was meant for you and something that is so aligned with you. And you obviously now, after working at the JPL, you've now gone on. You're a mentor now, and you're investing in kind of new startups. And it's amazing to kind of see you've kind of really come full circle in that, haven't you?
I agree, and plus I do agree that there's some downside to moving around. Changing your environment, changing friends that you've created over the years. But there's also an upside to that upbringing. And looking back, I actually like it. It kind of rounded my, let's say, thinking in a way that was open to different cultures, different people of different backgrounds, religions, color. And even in my work at JPL over the many years, I think it really differentiated me because I was extremely well-traveled internationally and can talk to people about their language and history and their ways of life that were very different than what we're used to day to day. So I think that helped me in my career. Yeah,
that's very interesting that you've touched on that, because that is something so big in what we shout about. You've kind of just proved our point there. Well, not that it needs to be proven, because it's been statistically proven time and time again that, you know, if we all come from the same place in a team, we can only go so far, and we need these diverse backgrounds, because it's the different experiences and the cultures that you've been exposed to that shape you as a person, and your outlook on things, and what you are able to bring to a team to kind of collectively reach your goal and, you know, exceed that goal even. And, you know, if we've all grown up in the same village, know all the same people, the same town, wherever you come from, it's not, you know, you're not going to have that diversity. And I think it is very limiting. So it's really interesting to
Totally
hear that
agree.
from you.
Plus, it's more fun.
Yeah, exactly. Never a dull moment. So touching on Mandala Space Ventures, could you tell our listeners a bit about what you do there, and how they fit into the space sector, as well as kind of where you see them being in the next 5 years?
Thank you. So yeah, when I left JPL, which is now about 18 months ago, I have to say I really thought long and hard about whether or when to make a transition. And there are several factors that helped me. One is that, you know, after 30 plus year tenure and a lot of accomplishments to be proud of, and working with some fabulous people at NASA and JPL, I just felt that I was frankly very comfortable, could continue doing what I was doing and get recognized worldwide. But I just felt that I had to disrupt myself and start something new. And just, you know, I still have energy and still have a good sense of direction. So I just wanted to do something, even if it means stepping down a few levels and starting something brand new. That really appealed to me. And so that was one element. The other is the timing. I really felt that commercial space is at a inflection point. After many decades, you know, JPL is, you know, 80 years old. It was preceded NASA. NASA was born in 1958, or created, and JPL was founded in 1936. So JPL has a long history predating NASA. And I just felt that the timing for a entrepreneurial, what is called a venture studio, basically a place where entrepreneurs can come to and get the services and the mentorship and the help to start up a company in the space business. So that's what I'm focused. I'm building on my experience and 32 years at JPL. I'm not going beyond my experience base. And I really believe that this is a huge growth field for the world, in the United States in particular, but for the whole world, as emerging space is coming to Africa and Asia and South America, and more becoming democratized. So I believe in that, and I want to be part of that change.
Yeah, thank you for going through that. Such an interesting story to hear about. And it's, you know, I think that's a completely understandable next step for you, because after working for NASA for so many years and gaining so much from that, you've now moved on to your own venture and kind of put yourself in a position where you can now empower new companies and entrepreneurs to propel the commercial space sector into the future through investment and mentoring. So I think it's a great place for you to be, following a very fruitful career in the industry.
And I would add to everything you said, besides mentorship or investing, there is the commercialization of IP, which to me is essential component. So it is not just, let's say, a founder or an entrepreneur comes to Mandala. I and my team have been exposed to many decades of the technologies that have been under development in the space communities that are funded by national governments. So the United States government, NASA, DOE, DOD. So there's a lot of technology that has been developed and is waiting to be commercialized. And that's an additional component that Mandala is offering to founders.
Yeah, it's really exciting to hear about these kind of emerging areas of the sector from an inside source such as yourself. So now that you've kind of embedded yourself into the industry for the past 30 years or so, and you've experienced so much across the sector, What would you say it is that you love the most about the space sector?
So I really like, and this has been, the last 18 months have given me an opportunity to look at different aspects of this business. So I am able to answer your question a little bit more directly, which I would not have been able to do maybe 18 months ago. And so at this point, from a Mandala Space Ventures point of view, I really enjoy and feel I can make the biggest contribution in the early stage formation of a startup company focused on space. So Mandala is focused on hopefully being the first check, the first investment in a startup company at the earliest stage of its life cycle. Many ventures specialize in mid-range, latter stage, even early stage. We like to focus, and I see my contributions of best value at a pre-seed or seed round of a startup company. If they are already in a latter stage, maybe A, B, C, my contribution from or Mandala's contribution from an innovation point of view is less obvious. It can still be a role in the later stage, which is more due diligence, more understanding the risks and so on. But in terms of contributions and value added, it is at the early stage of a startup company.
Yeah, I completely see what you mean. It must be so rewarding for you to see the impact you've had from such an early stage and what that kind of grows into with the help of Mandala Space Ventures and the vital kind of experience and expertise that you guys have, and that you can, it's really invaluable for these companies. I was actually watching a few of your clients saying how, and there are a few videos on your social media, how they were saying that you just take a weight off their shoulders and they can focus on what they need to do. And there's so many things that you guys take care of for them. And you could just see and how grateful they are for the help and how it works. It's work. They're doing so well. It is with the help of you. So yeah, it's really interesting work.
I hope so. And our plan is to really grow this aspect more and more. Because there's a lot of talent out there, a lot of good experience, but and you know, there's in entrepreneurship, there's kind of almost a paradox in the sense you want the youthfulness, you want the energy, and I say that without discrimination. You know, I'm in my call it senior part of my career, but the young people, the entrepreneurs in their 20s and 30s. Have the energy and the audacity that an entrepreneur, a company needs. And yet they lack the experience. They lack the deep tech. So the best of the two is to come to Mandala. We will kind of nurture you and advise you and take some of that uncertainty in terms of risk assessment and deep tech and add to your team in a way that will accelerate you, advance you in your company, and just provide credibility, because I think that's the real thing missing with a young entrepreneur.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is something that's so common across the space sector, is this kind of collaboration where people that are maybe more established in the industry, they want these lower level people to exceed, and they want people to be excited. And they want the amount. I've spoken to so many people. I'm relatively new in the sector. I've spoken to so many people that, you know, I thought maybe might be a bit intimidating, or you never know. But it's just everyone is so lovely and passionate about what they do. And you can see how much there's so much talk about community and collaboration and helping out. And people say, oh, reach out to me if there's anything I can help you with. And that's something that I really am finding about the space sector, which I really love, which I feel that everything you've just touched on is really in line with that as well.
Well, I agree. And space, you know, has multiple, let's say, layers of interpretation, meaning that, yes, it's a startup company. Yes, it needs to grow, have revenue, have customers, all the usual things of any startup company. But then space has a physical and a metaphysical layer. You know, going into space, every astronaut will tell you that it is an experience that is life-changing. And so space has multiple layers of looking at the earth as one, looking at the people as one, sharing a common destiny, and so on. So space does have this metaphysical aspect to it that maybe other areas do not. And that's a opportunity, at least the way I see it, is to really communicate how space can be a unifying force or unifying aspect for all people.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting that you should touch on kind of unity and speaking about viewing the world as kind of one. Really brings us on to something that I really wanted to touch on, which is one of the big motives of us even starting this podcast, which is making space accessible for everyone. That's something we're very passionate about. We talk about it a lot every day in everything that we do. And a really hot topic across the industry right now is kind of the constant battle for talent, as well as what more we can be doing. And something which is really important, which I'm sure you will agree, is to be impacting change as much as possible from a young age across STEM to make sure we're getting this diverse talent, bringing people together, unifying them in space, and making sure that we can kind of sustain the sector's growth in the years to come. So touching on kind of that kind of, incepting at a young age in STEM and getting diversity into the industry, what do you feel that we should be doing differently across the sector and at STEM level to impact change for now and for future generations?
Well, I do feel passionate about this topic. Again, I mentioned space has multiple layers to it of interpretation, and one is education and also inspiration. Young kids love space, and almost by as a general rule, it's inspirational, it's motivational, it generates curiosity, and to me, looking back at my upbringing and how I grew up, what I credit my family and my bigger brother was the ultimate implantation of the seed for curiosity. And to me, curiosity is the root of growth, of the intellect, of knowledge and doing good. And space has that. We are still curious about what's going up in our galaxy, in our solar system, and still trying to figure out where we came from and where we're going, and are there others out there like us? So those are, hugely complex and fundamental questions that humanity is dealing with. And yet you can bring it down to a 2-year-old and show them stars and show them space. So there's not many disciplines that can go from a 2-year-old to a 82-year-old and generate kind of curiosity and enthusiasm. So to me, education is the top element to answer your question. And starting at an early age, space has a lot of value in the education of our young generations.
I completely agree with you on that. And I really like that point that you touched on about kind of planting this seed of curiosity to get people interested in the industry, because I think not even just children, like you said, how can anyone not be fascinated by space? It's directly above all of us. You can't ignore it, and we're all aware of it and all the amazing things happening. So I completely agree with you there that it's that curiosity, but also when you are dealing with young people, kind of the encouragement and the motivation to kind of ignore barriers, whatever that may be, for whatever reason you're experiencing these barriers. I think that if that curiosity combined with the motivation and the drive and the willingness to succeed and not letting kind of failures be the end of you, will kind of drive people into the industry.
Well, I agree. And to your point, space and education at an early age, to me, is an equalizer. It is, not gender specific or race or religion. Space is a unifier. Somebody who figures out the mysteries of the universe, doesn't matter where you came from, you'll be, applauded around the world. So I think it's a great unifier and normalizing, and anybody from anywhere can, as I am evidence of, I came from Belgrade to JPL and did quite well. And now I'm, as you said, a mentor and eager to teach others.
Yeah. I love that analogy of space being a unifier, because I completely agree, and that is very much behind what EVONA are pushing. And I think just kind of touching back on what we said about, inspiring young people, I touched briefly on kind of not letting failures get you down. Something that I'd really like to touch on is kind of failures and achievements that you have experienced in your career, because as I'm sure we know, across social media platforms and such like that, people really highlight their successes and their achievements and the products, but we don't often see kind of the hard work and the sacrifices that people have put in to get up to that achievement that they are broadcasting to the world. So touching on that, what would you consider to be your biggest failure? What did you learn from that? And kind of on the other side of that fence, what is your biggest career achievement to date?
Wow. Do I really have to answer the question? What is my biggest failure?
I know, I don't like using that word, but
I'd say the toughest lesson learned or failure, I'm not sure it's my failure, but certainly the toughest moment that I've had at JPL would be, without any doubt, was in the early 2000s, so about 20 years ago. The whole country, the United States, transitioned from I would say a healthy R&D budget, and I'm speaking nationwide, not just NASA, but the DOD and NSF and so on, transitioned, and it was a political change of, from the top, that really moved the nation from reducing the basic research into more tactical, near-term research. And this was a fundamental change at the level of the White House and so on. And this percolated throughout all the agencies, including NASA. And at the time, I was leading internally to JPL, a center for research and development that was really pioneering breakthrough technologies 20, 30, 40 years ahead of its time. And I experienced overnight a shutdown, a loss of funding that was just, how should I say, inexplainable to me, at least. Why would anybody do that? And this resulted in people moving around, losing their positions and so on. And this was a tough time. I switched careers at that time within JPL. But this happens in cycles of governments and so on. But to me, that's a really huge lesson learned, that if I ever can be of any influence, a great country like this one has to, or any country has to, if it has the ability, it has to invest in its future. And basic research or fundamental research in space is something the United States has gone up and down investing in. And looking back, I'm sure people regret that. But that was one of the toughest times. I can't attribute that to my failure, but it was, I had to deal with, in a way, a failure of not securing funding for my center. And that was the toughest time that I went through. In terms of the greatest success and pride, I would really say that's, I was successful in capturing 2 missions for JPL within the NASA Discovery Program. One is called GRAIL and the other is called InSight, InSight Lander on Mars, and the GRAIL mission at the Moon. Both of those were remarkable, I would say, remarkable odds of against winning those competitions. And especially the InSight lander on Mars was a tremendously tough competition. It was we were partnered with many international agencies, including CNES in France, and DLR in Germany, and many others. So that was a tremendously hard-won victory of winning the competition. Very proud of both of those, and I would say especially Insight was a tough win. And both of those were very successful. Grail launched on time, and with the PI, Maria Zuber, was a greatly successful science mission. And then Insight with the PI, Bruce Bannert, is still ongoing and doing great science on Mars. So I would say those are two major successes. And not to shortchange anything, but you mentioned the ventilator. In the last year of my career at JPL, I worked with a fabulous team. Had the pleasure of working with Roger Gibbs, Rob Manning, David Van Buren, and others to lead the JPL ventilator project that is still being licensed and used around the world. But we rallied to the needs of the world at the beginning of COVID to design, develop, and commercialize a low-cost ventilator for COVID.
Yeah. I actually watched your video on it, and it was so incredible to hear I heard all the team talking about it, and you could just say, everyone was saying, I can't sleep, I won't sleep, but none of us, we all refuse to stop, because it obviously it's a call to humanity. And I think the video started and it said, NASA's JPL we do not produce ventilators, but we have the talent. So we've banded together to do that. And it's so interesting to hear about you kind of taking your skills and using them in other areas to help people, because I did actually, when I actually watched that video, the workshop at Caltech, was really interested to hear about Grail. And I was also interested to hear about how you moved. I think you mentioned on this when you were speaking about your biggest, not biggest failure, that's a very harsh set of words, but your earlier answer, when you moved from a tech developer to working on mission concepts, that must have been an amazing transition.
That was amazing transition. And as I said, I lost my funding, and it was very disappointing. Because we were doing really remarkable things at JPL that were really, had we continued with that level of investment, would have been just, the whole country and the world would have been very proud. But that's what happened. And so I was at a very difficult time in my career in terms of, should I leave JPL? Should I go in, to the prime contractors or somewhere else? I was ready to leave because I just felt disappointed in the whole system of research and so on. But JPL, to its credit, the management basically said, Leon, don't go anywhere. Take some time to think this through, and we'll find the right career path for you. And they did. And the opportunity came for this discovery proposal. And I remember interviewing with the PI, Maria Zuber. She's currently still at MIT. And my interview with her was, Professor Zuber, I've never done anything like a discovery proposal before. I've done many DARPA, DOD, smaller proposals, and I've been very successful. But I work hard, and I'm really excited about working with you on something like this. And after about 5 minutes, Maria said, Leon, you're my man. I want you. We're done. So that was it. It was one of the shortest interviews I had. And from there on, we did a lot of good things together and still remain very close friends.
Well, that is such a perfect story to think that you came from that place of feeling, frustrated, and understandably when you've put in all this work and there's issues with funding, and you were thinking about even leaving. And thankfully you didn't, because you stuck it out. It sounds like they really wanted to keep you there. You were like a really valuable member of the team, and you stuck it out, and, and look at where it's got you now. And that amazing opportunity came on. You went on to do work on so many amazing mission concepts, some of which are, actually were put into practice. And, if you had let those obstacles and hurdles that you faced in the past kind of be the end of you, and, if you had more of a defeatist attitude about it, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I agree, but I also want to give credit to the JPL management. JPL has a kind of a more of a philosophy that JPL invests in the person and builds the career rather than any one specific job or task. Not many large companies do that, you know, people are often a statistic, and there's a large turnover. JPL does have many people like myself who stay many decades, and part of that is a tribute to the management that really focuses on the career and the person, and that's what they did with me.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are starting to see that now, that you need to invest in your team. That's something that at EVONA we're very passionate about. And, you know, it's your people are at the core of everything you do. So if you're not investing in your team and they don't feel valued, you know, they'll represent you differently. And I think when people feel valued, they feel so personally attached and aligned with the project and the company that they will work overtime times a million to kind of work towards the shared goal. And I think it's really interesting to kind of touch on your journey as a whole and kind of what you've learned and the peaks and the troughs. And I think just for anyone listening that is kind of a few steps behind and is taking inspiration from this conversation, it'd be really great to hear what would you say the best resources on your journey that you identified and utilized, whether it was courses, programs, or maybe mentors that helped you kind of segue into the sector?
Well, very good. I certainly want to recognize my mentors, and actually two of them are on my Mandala advisory board. One of them is Dan Golden, who used to be the NASA administrator and a longest serving NASA administrator, Daniel S. Golden. He's currently on my Mandala advisory board. And also Charles Elachi, who was the JPL director for 15 years and now is a professor emeritus at Caltech. So both of them are on my advisory board for Mandala. In particular, Charles Elachi, from the first day that I joined JPL, was a mentor to me, and I audited his remote sensing class at Caltech. And from there on, we were very close, and certainly he's a mentor. I want to also mention two other people. Another person that I want to recognize is Jacob Van Ziel, who unfortunately just 2 years ago passed away. He was my mentor and worked at JPL for 40 years or so from South Africa or Namibia, in that region. Wonderful, wonderful human being. And also my good friend Firuz Naderi, who is alive and well in Malibu, retired, and he was also a great mentor to me. So I definitely credit my mentors in a big way for guiding me and so on. But in terms of feedback or lessons to anybody viewing this, I want to share something that I felt developed as a let's say a philosophy or something that I've carried throughout my career at JPL, and a lesson learned that has been kind of grown over time. I've been well known at JPL to not always agree with everybody, and that's putting it mildly. I was often the odd one out in terms of opinions, and after a while I became very comfortable there. So, but it wasn't always the case. At the beginning of your career, even with a PhD, coming to a place like JPL, you're very often intimidated by the experts, the big, the gurus, the people who've been there 40 years before you and can recite every mission that NASA did and so on. So JPL can be quite intimidating. And my experience has been every time I did not speak up, I regretted it. And every time I did speak up, I never regretted it, even if I was wrong. Wow. But the worst situation that you can be in is not speak up and then regret it. And I started my career and have been in situations where I knew it, I should have spoken up, I should have said something. And then I became more comfortable speaking up, even if everybody shuts me up and says, oh, that's the dumbest thing we heard or whatever. But after a while, I became very comfortable speaking up. So my advice to anybody, even junior people, that trusting your gut, trusting your instinct, trusting your thought or opinion, it's important to voice that. And even when you're wrong, because you learn. But then you get real pleasure from being right and voicing your opinion before others. And so I'm happy to say towards the end of my career, I was more in that latter part where I would speak up when others would not. And I think that's a very important lesson that I would impart on to my children and to anybody listening.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there on the importance of kind of voicing your ideas, because I personally believe that many a good idea, I guess we won't even know the extent of this, but a loss to kind of self-doubt. And on some level, I think it's embarrassment if you're maybe in a room full of people and you think, God, can I say that? And I personally know that I've not voiced a few things that I are still circling in the back of my head. I think, God, that was a stupid idea. And as you said, I do kind of regret that. I think that's a great nugget of wisdom for anyone kind of in early stages of the sector. And I'd also, on the same kind of note, be interested to know, what advice would you give to someone from a non-technical background that's looking to enter into the space sector in 2022 or beyond?
There are many non-technical backgrounds, including people on the Mandala team, that are essential to this whole ecosystem. Entrepreneurs who have been in the business of finance, investment, including management, are all essential to this business. So it's not all technical. In fact, I've personally built Mandala team where I can carry the technical depth, but I need a lot of help on operations. I need a lot of help in finance. I need a lot of help in just the 0 to 1, growing from an idea to a company. So I'd say it's not even kind of a secondary position. It's an essential partnership between the non-technical and the technical. And that's the kind of what I'm carrying in Mandala right now, is I've hired people that are not technical as principals and partners in Mandala Space Ventures.
Yeah, that is something that we are so passionate about here at EVONA, and I loved hearing you talk about that.
I should add, Mia, also communications. Just the fact that we're doing this, and on our team, Emma Way is in charge of social media outreach communications. That is huge today in this business. Just getting the word out and attracting talent to Mandala is a huge part of our business.
Completely. I think a lot of people don't realize that, and they count themselves out because they don't have a PhD or they're not an engineer or a scientist, but it's not. That is such a closed-minded and kind of archaic view of the sector, which I think a lot of companies and a lot of individuals are kind of campaigning to change now, because, we need artists, we need, as you said, media, communications, lawyers. I am a copywriter and content creator. I never, ever thought I would, I thought, oh, no business working in space, but I do. And I think everyone does. And I think, that's so important for people to realize that no matter what you're doing, there's room for you in space, in the sector. And you could be involved in something so emerging and so innovative and exciting and a bit magical, I think, in a way. And I think don't yeah, it is. So anyone listening, don't rule yourself out because you're not a trained and qualified engineer. Because
to go even further, people like Steve Jobs did not have a technical background, and companies like Google and Facebook and Apple and others, they understand the job of a product manager. And a product manager needs to understand the product, the market, the customer needs. And that doesn't have to be a technically deep, a person with a technical background. It's a person who can imagine and innovate and understand the market and then understand the product. And that does not have to be a technical person.
You're completely right there. I think the current status of the space sector and where we know it's going to go in the future and kind of what our hopes are for in the future, for the sector in the future, it is a collaboration of, as we're saying, technical and non-technical people. And people, I think the general public, people that aren't involved in the space sector, kind of see it for surface level, but they don't. When you think about it, how does any business work? You don't just, you have all these layers of people. It's so multifaceted because that's how you make a company work. And space isn't any different. It's such a vital part of, modern society and the future that it's just such a vital topic to be talking about. And I think kind of in that same breath, just to round things off, speaking about the current status of the space sector and where we are now, and specifically the commercial space industry, because I know that's something you're very involved in. What are your thoughts on the current status of the commercial space industry, and how do you see that evolving in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yes, well, I am excited to share my vision that I believe that the commercial space industry, it's just at its beginning of growth. It is, I believe, transformational. It is not just a destination. It is a strategic high ground. It is going to enable new industries, whether it's manufacturing in space or services in space, climate change monitoring from space. Just space is going to be more and more part of our daily lives. And besides the fact that the humanity is at a point where it will be expanding from Earth to the Moon and Mars, and that is upon us. It's not something that we have to work too hard to envision. So I see the next 5 to 10 years growing in a number of different areas. I believe infrastructure in space will grow, and that includes, and in fact, NASA is funding a commercial lower Earth orbit destinations program for new private commercial space stations. There's at least 4 commercial competitors out there. So you can envision in the future multiples of these. And then now you have tourism in space, you have real estate in space, you have research in space, microgravity capabilities, manufacturing in space. All of that is transformational. And that's even without going to the moon. Now you go from Earth to the moon, you have a transportation system between Earth and the moon. And on a continuous basis, you have communications infrastructure, you have resource utilization and mining on the moon and fuel depots. All of these are part of an exciting future within the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's such an exciting sector to be working in. And I really think that with the growth, what is becoming quite rapid growth, I'm very happy that you touched on space tourism there, because that is a huge area of interest of mine. I'm fascinated by that. But I think that is, that's public knowledge now. People are aware of this. But I think a few years ago, people have said, "Oh, that's not true. They're not doing that. That's not possible." But I think, we're seeing companies where you can now, there's full space travel agencies that are actually operating, which is crazy to think. I think.
Yeah, I have to say, I was one of those maybe 5 years ago or so, where I was really looking kind of at the space tourism industry in with some doubt whether it was the right timing, because there have been space tourism conferences for the last 20 years. But I think things have changed considerably, and space tourism is clearly upon us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the more this kind of becomes in the mainstream media, and it's a reality and not just a sci-fi dream and possibility, I think that's when people are really going to start to understand how integrated space and the space sector and all of the corners of the space sector and everything it does is so integrated and ingrained into our daily lives, and has been since, for years, for so many years. I think people don't realize that. And I love working in the space sector in this moment in time, because, I've got so many friends that don't work in the sector, but I think I can talk to them about things because they people are understanding more and they know more, and it is a unifier. People love talking about space because it's so interesting and it's so cool. At the base level, it is just that. And I think the sector that you're working in is so exciting. It's exciting times ahead, and it sounds like we have a lot to look forward to.
Absolutely. And again, it is an emerging and a growing, fast-growing industry. We're seeing a lot of new developments in the launch vehicle business, a lot of newcomers, including SpaceX is already now fully established and a leader in the launch vehicle business, but there's at least a half a dozen coming after SpaceX and Rocket Labs and the others, Astra, Fireflies, and Virgin Orbit, and so on. But there's another half a dozen that are emerging that are going to bring down the cost of access to space. And then there's the constellations that are emerging by the thousands. There are problems emerging as well, as how do we keep space free and safe? How do we manage the waste in space? That's a critical challenge. But it's certainly an exciting time. Space tourism, manufacturing in space, and the whole business of services in space is going to be a huge field of growth.
Yeah, you're completely right there. And I think there's so many really rapidly emerging areas of the sector that are going to have such an impact on our life. And I think all these new and exciting companies that you're talking about, by the day, by the week, by the month, I'm just loving seeing all this news about them and reading about these things that, how is this possible? How are they doing this? But it's just, they are doing what we once thought was impossible. And I think it's so inspiring, and it's such a great time to get involved in the sector, because there's always been space for everyone in the sector, and I think now more than ever there is more space than ever in space for people to find their place. Rhyming.
Couldn't agree with you more. You put it so beautifully.
Thank you. It's been so great discussing this with you. I really love your take on it. I think you've got such unique and broad experience that it's just been really amazing to get your take on these. Really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. I know you're very busy.
Thank you, and thank you, Ivona, for hosting this, and thank you for all your questions, and all the best to your audience. And Mandala is open for business.
Well, you're very welcome. The pleasure was all ours. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you, Leon.
Thank you. All the best.
You too. Bye.